Today I'm outside at the lake. This is where I live. I have two reminders for today. The reminders are the effort alone is worth it, and materialization is the spiritual path of God. And I'm going to weave them together. It always ends up perfect like that, where I can, they always have something to do with each other, and it's always on the perfect day for what I need for that day. I use the word God a lot, which for me encompasses all things or a lot of different things, but you don't need to use that word. You can use anything. I don't care. You could use science. You could use source. You could use Allah. You could use whatever you want. And my own perspective on God, I think that it's useful to use a word like God because it fills the void. And I've sort of gone through different stages of what I think that word means to me. And as of now, it's just a word that I use that could be any other word. I personally have a non-dual perspective as like my end-all be-all perspective on reality. And so God for me is the all things. The awareness that pervades underneath everything, the energy that materializes. It's time, it's space. And the reason why I say you can use the word science for this even, and this is a subject I'll probably lightly or deeply touch upon in most of my videos, because this is something that makes everything what it is, that even from a completely atheistic point of view, I still see that everything is non-dual, as what is everything, absolutely everything, made of? Atoms. And what are atoms made of? Elementary particles. And that's what science says is the smallest, absolutely smallest material. And what is that made of then? It has to be made of something, right? So it's not just itself. There's material that makes material. But all those are like different patterns, vibrating patterns of energy. And I said this in my last video, and I'll say it again, that I hate using that language because New Age has started using those words. But the reason that they use those words is because they are the right words. They're the actual words to be used. But it does sound cheesy, I feel like. But anyways, all things, including thoughts, air, everything, is just made at the smallest level of elementary particles, which are only made of energy materializing itself in the form of different patterns. And what is energy? Energy isn't anything at all. Energy is just empty potential, the potential for something to happen. So the fact that anything exists at all makes no sense. Everything, including thoughts, are just energy moving in different patterns. And what is aware? So you can either say that there is awareness that pervades all things, under all things, and that is what is aware of the energy patterns, or you can say that energy itself is aware of itself, which implies that energy has the capacity for awareness hidden within it, which also would imply sort of that there is a level of awareness within all things, including rocks, trees. It might be very low awareness, and the reason why humans are so extra aware is because our energy patterns are more complex, so there's more to be aware about. But rocks would then inherently have some level of awareness, even though it would be minuscule, because their energy patterns are very simple. So with that being said, even within science, everything is the same thing. Everything is all just energy dancing with itself at the end of the day. And there's either a separate awareness that underlies everything, watching it all unfold, or the energy itself is aware of itself. But in which case, what does that mean, a separate awareness? And could that even exist if there's nothing to be aware of? So it's like one implies the other. If there was no awareness, energy wouldn't exist. There'd be nothing to see it. And if there was no energy, awareness wouldn't exist either, because there would be nothing to bring it into existence. There'd be no energy, there'd be no potential for awareness. So if that is all things, and you say that you can say pure consciousness, pure awareness would be God, in which case, since they're two sides of the same coin, energy would be God as well, which would mean all things would be God. So bright. So that would imply that materialization would be the spiritual path of God, or the path of God. You don't really even need to put in spiritual. I mean, I know that spiritual is a nice word to use as like a blanket statement for things that get you more free, I guess you could say. But I really don't see any difference between the spiritual and the atheistic. Because the atheistic can get you just as free. It's just a different word for it. So materialization is the path of God, the spiritual path of God. Energy patterns are moved by other energy patterns. They aren't moved by the awareness itself. The awareness itself is pure, unadulterated awareness. Because awareness can't move things, or else it would be classified as energy, right? That would be the potential for something to happen. So awareness is awareness. Energy might be aware of itself, but the awareness itself is not the end. The awareness itself is not the energy. It would be the other side of the same coin. The awareness is what makes energy exist. Energy is what makes awareness exist. But there's the awareness underneath it all, watching everything unfold. And then the energy is the only thing that's making anything happen. And the energy is the thing that's happening as well. Dancing into different patterns, bouncing into other patterns, which would just be itself one giant wave of energy morphing into itself in different shapes and forms, creating thoughts, creating rocks, what we call rocks, what other energy patterns call rocks. If all we are, all the human brain is energy patterns, and it's just calling itself what it is, which is just a pattern reacting to another pattern, which is a thought. And then that pattern tells the other pattern that this is what that pattern means. And then that pattern goes along with it. And that's all we are. There's no it's just different patterns moving around. It's all organs are. It's all the brain is. Different energy patterns moving into neurons and electrons and atoms, calling itself an atom. So it's the different patterns that give itself its own name. So if we were to, make this in a bit more simple language so we stop using this abstract term of patterns, it's our own selves giving all of these things labels. In and of themselves, they're completely empty of an inherent label of anything at all. It's the observation that makes it real, right? The other side of that coin, which is the energy observing itself. All things in and of themselves are pure, empty potential. And you collapse that potential once you observe it and label it. I'd also like to quickly add in here when I talk about collapse or collapse in potential. For example, quantum computers like Google's Willow run on qubits. So a normal computer runs on bits. Quantum computers run on qubits. Bits can either be 1 or 2, right? Qubits can be 1 and 2 at the same time. They can be anything in between. They can be everything in between. They can be everything, absolutely everything at the exact same time, at the exact same moment. And it isn't until they are everything, okay? And it isn't until they collapse into an answer, once answer is observed or they are observed, it collapses into a state of either 1 or 2, or the answer that it collapses into. But before, it is in a space called a superposition, which is just completely infinite potential. It is like pure energy, just the potential to do something, to be something. But it is nothing in and of itself yet, until it collapses into that thing. So that's what I'm also trying to explain here, that the energy itself is empty of an inherent nature until your own observation of it ends up collapsing that potential, that infinite potential, into an answer, into one or the other, into something. But inherently, it's nothing at first. Okay, I'm gonna go on once we come back, and it'll make more sense. Otherwise, what would it be? It could be absolutely anything. That pattern is given a meaning once you give it a meaning. Some people like pain. Most people hate pain. If pain is an energy pattern that goes like this, and some people label that as good, they like it, that proves that the energy pattern in and of itself doesn't have an inherent meaning, because some people call it pleasure while most others call it pain. It's the observer, the other energy patterns interacting with it, that makes it meaningful. That gives it any sort of property in and of itself. So that person that likes pain might be made of other energy patterns that interact with that particular pattern in such a way that makes it beautiful and a pleasurable experience. So they're built of different patterns than you. All things are strange patterns, which don't mean anything until the other patterns bounce upon it and say that pattern is this thing, and I like it or I don't like it, or I'm gonna mesh my pattern with it or I'm not going to, and I'm gonna move on. So the path of God, or the path of the awareness, is simply to materialize. That is its path. And if it's all empty of an inherent nature and it's all just infinite potential, it has no preferences. It's you who's giving it preferences. Well, your energy patterns, which are patterning in a certain way. And then other patterns that are telling it, I like that thing, I don't like that thing. But liking and disliking also don't inherently exist. It's other patterns that are saying that that is a property that exists. And those patterns don't exist either. I know I'm like spiraling here. Nothing exists, okay? So the materialization is simply materialization. That is the path of God. That is the path of all things. They're just to materialize. And there's nothing to it until you give it meaning. And you can mold the meaning, you know? Energy moves. It's never stagnant. It's never completely still. Otherwise, it wouldn't be energy. But it can always shift and it can always change. And the only thing that makes energy move is other energy. So you can actively move that energy in a certain direction. And sometimes it takes a lot of effort. And sometimes it barely takes any at all. And sometimes you can get really, really good at it. And it moves. And it always can just move. It moves, it moves. And you can yourself become that empty potential, that infinite potential. You can start identifying with the truth of the nature of that reality instead of identifying with the suffering, the pain, the pleasure, anything. You can just say, oh, wait, pleasure doesn't inherently exist in and of itself. It's other energy patterns that have been habituated to say that it exists that makes it exist. What if I just observe it? What if I just watch and follow that infinite potential and see where it arises into? See how it moves, see how it dances. What if I just dance with it? What if I just dance with all of life? What if I just embody that infinite potential, which is God's path of materialization, and I just let it materialize? And I don't judge it, and I don't create more and more and more patterns, rigid structures to fit into, but I just watch that potential emerge. I just be the awareness, the other side of that coin. And then you don't have to feel the pain, and you don't have to be attached to the pleasure and chasing it all the time, which is just another version of pain. You can just live in it, in that moment. Allow it to arise. Move with it. And then you can be it. You can be that beautiful moment. Pain doesn't get hurt by pain, right? It's something else that gets hurt by pain. If you stop realizing that the pain is just another version of your own energy patterns moving in such a way that hurts you, and you start just identifying with the pain itself and just being like, oh, this is just a part of my dance. This is just a pattern. This is just a movement. I don't need to be the one who's hurt. I can just move with this pattern and this part of this dance, and then move on to something else right after that pattern has moved through wherever you are, wherever you're identifying yourself to be. Because it has to move, because that's energy. And then when you're in the pleasure, you get to be the pleasure. You get to be it all and sink into it. It's like nothing you've ever experienced. Well, actually it is. It's everything you've ever experienced. But consciously. So then if we've established that all things are on the same level as all things, because it's all just patterns habituated to be certain patterns and moving through the dance of life, then that's a journey without a goal. You're just allowing yourself to move and dance instead of being caught by those fears of not making something of yourself or something of your life, it needing to be a certain way for you to be successful, for you to be okay. But it's the effort alone that's worth it. It's the effort of life experiencing itself that's worth it, that makes God's spiritual path move at all. Move into materialization. There is no goal for God. Is there any goal for the material to exist? What's the goal? Like, even from a dual standpoint, okay, now, well, the goal is eventually for us all to be in heaven. Revelations come to pass, and the rapture is upon us, and eventually God defeats the devil. We're all saved and we're all in heaven. Okay. Now what? Like, that's not the goal, because there's still life happening even after that. So we haven't reached the goal. There was no end point yet. It's still happening. Now we're all existing, but in heaven, right? So that wasn't the goal. That was just one part of the dance. Now we're all in heaven. Now what? There will never be an end. Ever. Ever. There's no goals. There's different parts of the dance. But the effort of the dance alone is what the dance is. That's what makes anything worth it at all. There's nothing else but effort. There's nothing else but the dance. There's nothing. So fill out that job application that you probably won't get anyways. Because the goal was never the job. The goal was the effort of the dance, of filling out the application. There it is. Wow. That was a brand new dance I've never done before, because everything is. Even if you do the same thing over and over and over, it's never the same. It's never the same. Things are different. Things are different in the world around you. Things are different in your mind that day. You're thinking different thoughts while the actions are happening. And the thoughts are just different versions of action in and of themselves. You move, it moves. There's nothing left. There's nothing else. The bugs are back. It's warm again.